Welcome back to Sasquatch Performance Garage, everybody. Today we are working on my wife's 2005 Honda CRV, and we are going to be replacing the torque converter on this thing. It has been shuddering when trying to lock up at low speeds. It has also had a horrendous noise when trying to accelerate fast from a stop. I'm going to go ahead and try to recreate those noises. I'm in the car right now, and we'll see if we can make the noise happen, and also see if we can get the shudder to happen, and hopefully you guys can hear it. If not, we'll just go past this, and I'll make a completely different intro. So, all right. So hopefully y'all could hear that. That was like a really horrendous whining noise. I believe it's probably the stator inside of the torque converter that is causing that whining. And the reason why I believe it's the stator is because it only does it from initial acceleration from the stop. You know, she could gun it if she's going normal speed and it doesn't make that noise. I believe it's probably because we're already in motion, and the stator doesn't have to work as hard to direct the fluid at that point. The stator is obviously not the reason why it's shuddering during lockup at low speeds. It's been shuddering a lot longer than it has been making this noise. So, you know, newer vehicles, I guess not necessarily, oh, shuddered a little bit there. I don't know if you saw the camera shake. Shudder from lockup is it's trying to lock up at lower speeds to increase gas mileage and stuff like that, and it's obviously not able to either lock up, or the wheel does not like the lockup. I'm gonna go ahead and get it in the garage, start tearing this thing apart, bring you guys along the way, and we will see what happens. All right, everybody, first thing we're gonna do, we're gonna take off the battery here. Remember, no matter what you're doing on a vehicle, always disconnect the battery. We do not want any issues with that. Also gonna take everything out completely because we do show to have a little bit of corrosion here on the battery terminals. So I'm gonna try to get that taken care of while we're at it. Now we got our battery out, we're gonna go ahead and take out the intake filter box along with tubing and all that. Get all that out of the way so we have some room to work. Once we got the cover off, we're gonna go ahead and take off the bottom here. There are 3 screws to actually remove it with the cover on, but I find it a little bit easier to take it off in pieces, just so it's not as big, you're not having to mess with the whole dang thing. We're gonna go ahead and take out this battery tray here. I don't think it's necessarily gonna be in the way, but it will give us a little bit extra room to kind of move around here once we start taking out the motor mounts and moving the motor down and all that stuff. So it's got 5 bolts total. You got 3 on the top here, 1 on each side at the bottom attached to the frame. Those are a little bit harder to get to because they're kind of almost blind, so you got to really kind of contort to get in there. Top one's super easy, you just see them right from the top. So I'm gonna go ahead and get onto that. gonna take off the upper shroud here. Again, doesn't need to be taken off, but I do prefer to be able to see everything, and it's not that hard to take these out. So why not just make my life just a little bit easier with just a minute extra work. See, as you can see now, I can see straight down into the radiator area here, so I know I can take out the fans and all that good stuff. I went ahead and removed the front grille as well. Again, just trying to get more room here. We're gonna go ahead and remove the radiator to get it all out of the way. Again, make this easy on yourself. You know, the little bit of work up front can save you a lot of work at the end. So it's 2 push pins here. There are 2 more push pins on the bumper here once you pull that grille forward. Now we're gonna go underneath, take off the shroud under the car, so that we can, again, get more room. Got our lower shroud taken off. Got a few little push pins here. Push pin here, 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 here. So 4 on the very front. We got 1 down here, and then all the way down this, there's about 4 or 5 of them. And then up inside the wheel well, there's 2 on each side. So make sure you get all those taken off. Once it's there, it'll fall right out. All right, so radiator is out now. It sits in the radiator support at the bottom, then it has these 2 brackets at the top here. Pretty straightforward on it, but a little pain consuming, or a little time consuming. We have 1 bolt that's on top of the upper radiator support, and then on the side, this one's a little bit of a pain in the butt because it's hard to get to. There's not a lot of room to be able to move your ratchet or a ratcheting wrench. So it's just, you're gonna take a little bit of time, be patient with it, it's all good to go from there. Then at the bottom of the radiator, we have the main radiator hose, lower radiator hose, a connector for, like this electrical connector, don't know really what it's for necessarily. And then we have our 2 transmission cooler lines. And then you got your petcock down here. Disconnect those. Some people unscrew them as far as the transmission lines are concerned. I just took off the clamp for the hose. Makes it a little bit easier for me. Don't have to worry about threading it and all that good stuff. Then you just got to make sure you take off the bolts for the fan. So we got your driver's side fan here, 2 bolts there, and the 1 bolt for the reservoir, and you just pull it straight out of the top there. All right, next we're going to start disconnecting the electrical connectors from the transmission. We got some shift solenoids here, another little connector there, another one there, obviously another one right there. We'll remove all the electrical connectors out of the way. Since we are obviously removing the transmission, we need to move it as far out of the way as possible. Other thing that we're going to be removing, or moving at least, is this little guy right here. We're gonna move that out of the way so we can have enough room to move engine transmission assembly. I'm going to try and not disconnect anything else. It looks like I might have enough movement on everything else after that. We might have to disconnect these 3 hoses right here. It looks like that might be the only thing that's really gonna keep us in the way. Because once we get this main wiring harness out of the way, or at least up in the air, we won't have any problem with it getting caught and getting too tight. Everybody, we got all the electrical connectors off of the transmission here. We also moved the big wiring harness out of the way, disconnected pretty much everything other than the coils underneath this little cover here. We should be able to get by without having to do that. We do have a lot of slack right here. Once we start tipping the transmission down and the engine assembly down, we should be good to go. So now we're gonna go ahead, start on to the next little project here and get the vehicle up in the air on jack stands and start undoing the transmission mounts and put the strut brace over the top of it. All right, everybody, so we got the engine support bar put on. What we did is we actually removed the hood to give us some extra clearance because we put it right back here. So obviously the hood would not have been able to open up or stay on there with it being open. So we put it on the fenders, and so far so good. We do not have any bending. We did put a wood block underneath the fender and the frame, or in between the fender and the frame, to make sure that it doesn't bend on that side. It's got a little bit more weight that's going to be supported over there. Got it hooked around the exhaust manifold down here. That's really the only place that we can really put it on that's going to be able to support the weight. Pretty easy, straightforward. I wanted to put it on first before we did any of the other suspension, exhaust, all that stuff, because I want to make sure that the engine can be supported and that it's in a good spot before I go any farther. All right, let's get to it. All right, so next thing we did, we took out the drive shaft. I'm not going to hold that right now. It's still underneath the car, but it has 4 12.10 millimeter bolts on the transmission side. Then we have 4 of the same bolts on the differential side, and then there is a center support bearing in the middle that uses a 14 millimeter bolt, and that's 2 of those. So undo those. They're actually pretty easy. The drive shaft is small enough in diameter to get a normal ratchet up there. I've done a few vehicles in the past where you have to have like a closed-ended wrench because there's no room to get it on the flange. But took that out, moved it out of the way so that you can drop the whole subframe. Then we have our catalytic converter assembly here. So we have 2 bolts up here on the exhaust manifold flange. They are a 12 millimeter bolt held on, you know, with like a spring tension type thing to hold it up there. Relatively easy to get to. Just, you know, use like a good long extension, you'd be just fine. Definitely put like PB Blaster or WD-40 on each of these bolts and nuts that we're taking off here because they are rusty. Then at the end of the catalytic converter assembly, going to the intermediate pipe or like the muffler assembly, we have 3 14 millimeter bolts here. Now mine were so rusty that the 14 was very loose on it, so I actually hammered on a 13 millimeter to 2 out of the 3. So we're going to replace those nuts when we go to install them again, but they should be 14, but again, you know, hammer on a 13 if need be. These are on there pretty dang tight compared to the front ones on the exhaust manifold, so it shouldn't be too hard to get to, but definitely gonna need some oomph to get going. Next thing we're gonna do is go ahead and start taking off the wheels, get the suspension kind of torn apart, CV axles, all that, so that we can then take it out of the transmission. And then we are actually pretty close to actually dropping and removing the motor mounts. So let's keep on going. So all of our nuts here on our wheels, 19 millimeters. I probably already knew that by now. You know, if you're doing this job, you've probably already taken the wheels off once or twice to do something else. So got that. Now the next thing we got a big old 36 millimeter nut right here. Oh baby, come on. Next we're going to go ahead and remove the lower control arm, actually not the whole lower control arm, but disconnect the ball joint from the spindle. That's what we're going to do here. So move our cotter pin. This is a nice little spring style retaining one, so you don't have to bend them. I like that. And it's going to be a 17 millimeter on the ball joint. So let's put it on there and bada bing, bada boom, break it loose. And so for my ball joint removal, I have this little tool here. It saves your boots. You don't have to use the pickle fork and destroy your boots. What it does, this grabs on top of the control arm and you screw in with this and it will push up on the ball joint stud. Now I do still keep the castle nut on there to make sure that the ball joint stud doesn't get deformed in any way. That nut just kind of keeps it a little more rigid. So we're gonna put that on there. And then just tighten it up a little bit. And it's done. It was easy as that. Like, no pain, no issues of freaking beating the hell out of something and worrying about metal getting deformed. I just broke it off just like that. Alright, once we get the sway bar taken off, then we are able to now take out the CVE axle here. Mine pushed pretty easily just with my thumb. You might have to be able to, like, you know, use a hub puller, push on it, you know, or hook onto it here, push it out, whatever works, but mine just comes out just like that. You will have to pull the ball joint all the way out of the control arm to be able to get enough movement, like right here, to be able to get it out. But pretty easy. And now we got that loose. Now we got to go underneath there, disconnect. Since we're on the passenger side, now we got to go underneath there and disconnect the CV axle bracket that is bolted to the engine. The driver's side is very easy, very straightforward. Once you disconnect or pull out the CV axle from the hub, just get a pry bar, pop it out of the transmission, and it's good to go. So this one's just a little bit more involved, so that's why I'm showing you on this side here. So here we have our passenger side CV axle already out. The bracket is held on by 3 14mm bolts at this hole, and this hole. You take those out and it will come right out. You just got to get you a pry bar right here. This is made directly up to the transmission. Push out a little bit, it will come right out. This is also the cover for the CV axle, little bracket here, and it mounts just like that. So this bolt right here goes to that hole there, that bolt there goes to that hole there, and then this one is connected directly to the engine. Pretty easy job. Obviously, if your boots are torn up, replace the CV axle now. You already have it out to do this job, and it's a good possibility that yours is probably torn. Mine actually looks really good. They look brand new almost. So let's keep on going on this. We're about to take out the subframe here shortly. All right, so we got both sides of the CV axles taken care of. All suspension is loose and taken care of where it needs to be. So I have already undone the front motor mount. It is a 17mm headed bolt that goes from one side to the other. I've also done the rear motor mount, again a 17mm bolt. Now we're about to drop the subframe. So we got 4 17mm bolts, one on each corner of the subframe. Once we undo those 17mm bolts, the subframe is ready to drop. You're either gonna need somebody to help you with the subframe here, or put a jack underneath one side of the subframe. I'm starting on the passenger side, so we're gonna take out that corner and leave the jack up here so that it's up. Then I'll start removing those bolts over there, and then I can lower it down little bits at a time. It'll be pretty easy, and show you guys once it's done here in a bit.
One thing I forgot to mention, and also forgot to record, is that you have to undo the flex plate from the torque converter. And the way you do that, there is a cover for that. It's 3 10mm bolts right in between the engine and the transmission. Take that cover off. There are 8 10mm bolts that hold the torque converter to the flex plate. While you're there as well, you also need to undo the shift linkage. So there are a couple more 10mm bolts to get that cover off, along with a spring clip that holds the shift cable to the linkage on the transmission. Get that undone. You can pull the shift cable right out of the subframe, and then you are good to go to this point that we're at right now.
All right, so where we're at now, we're almost ready to drop the transmission. I've taken out most of the transmission bolts that mount it to the motor. I got one left in there to kind of make sure the transmission doesn't just fall off the motor. So we're about to do the 3 mount bolts here. Once we get that done, I already have a jack underneath the transmission, so we'll lower it down with the jack along with the engine support bar here. Once we get it down towards a good angle, I'll then have my my helper here take off the last bolt up top here on the bell housing, and then we'll pull this bad boy out. So should be pretty straightforward, and we'll make a little time lapse of this from the top here. Alright guys, so we got the transmission out, got the torque converter out of there obviously. I did play with the stator in here a little bit. Our stator in here is this little sprag in here. It's a one-way sprag, so it should only go one way. And actually, if we look at this, it is going both ways. I can turn it both ways. It is not supposed to be like that. So obviously our stator is bad. So that's a good thing. Now if we look at our new one here, we got the same thing. We got our bottom splines down there. That is connected to the main input shaft. Then we have our sprag, our turbine, and I can spin it one way, but I can't spin it the other. No matter how hard I try with my finger, I cannot get it to spin the other way. So spins clockwise, cannot spin it counterclockwise. So I'm pretty glad that my diagnosis on this was correct, that we have a messed up stator, and that would also most likely have a messed up clutch. From here, I'm gonna go ahead and finish off for today. Tomorrow, we will start bright and early. We will put on the new motor mounts that we bought. 3 of the motor mounts were shot. Then we will put the new torque converter in, get this all ready to go, and hopefully be a little bit quicker to put it back together. Probably won't show you guys too much of putting it back together since I showed you guys pretty much how to take it apart. So it's just gonna be reverse of installation, but I still will bring you guys along for the ride a little bit. So, all right, everybody. So we got the transmission back in today. We decided to put it all in. We had 6 bolts all the way around, 17mm headed bolts, torqued those bad boys to 47 foot-pounds. Then we also put the new motor mounts in and torqued down the motor mount to the transmission, the 2 studs with nuts, and the 1 bolt. Those are 47 pounds as well. One thing I really recommend everybody getting is an actual transmission jack. I know you guys saw me yesterday take the transmission down with a regular jack. It's kind of precarious, but it works to take down a transmission. To put one up, you need something that you can manipulate a lot. So we just got just a cheap Harbor Freight one that has worked for me for many, many years. You're able to move the plate with the 2 handles here, all the way around like that. Gets you high enough as far as be able to jack it up in there, and it makes it so much easier to be able to actually manipulate the transmission and mate it up properly so that it goes onto the dowel pins, and then you can put your bolts in there. And then what we did after that, we put the little bolts on the flex plate to the torque converter. Those are torqued down to 108 inch-pounds. Next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna go ahead and put on the subframe. It's gonna be a little bit difficult to put it up compared to taking it down. So I'm gonna use my transmission jack and my regular jack, along with some jack stands to kind of move it up and put it into position. Obviously it's a little heavy, and you gotta make it just right to get the motor mounts to sit where they need to sit on the brackets. So we're gonna go ahead and get onto that, and I'll bring you guys back once I finish with that. All right guys, so we're pretty much done. Didn't have too many updates after putting the subframe back up, but again, it's just reverse of installation on that. So just watch the video again, you know, in the little individual steps that you're trying to figure out. At the very end of this job, obviously, we're gonna have to put coolant in there and burp it, along with making sure that we have enough fluid in the transmission. So to do the transmission, to make sure the fluid level is correct, you're gonna turn on the vehicle, have somebody in the car for you, and hold the brake, put it through reverse, neutral, drive, 2, 1, and back up in a slow progression. So all the different circuits in the valve body can have fluid running through them and get filled. Then you'll check the fluid once after that. Right about 8 quarts should be the correct amount. But again, you know, make sure you check it. It could all be different depending on how much drained out, you know, if you put anything in the torque converter and all that stuff. So for the coolant, you'll just have to, you know, make sure that the thermostat opens up, circulates water or coolant all the way through. Shouldn't be too hard of a job. We're gonna put the rest of our air cleaner assembly back in there and put our hood back on. We're gonna take it for a test drive and see how it works. So, all right, see you guys in a bit. All right, everybody, time for the test drive. So let's see what this can do. Hopefully we get rid of that crazy whining noise and that shudder. So let's see what's going on here. Looks like so far we got rid of that shudder. That's a good thing. Let's see what it does when it stops. Good. I didn't hear any crazy noise like it was before. That worked really well. Cool. Well guys, I'm gonna end from here. Appreciate you guys watching Sasquatch Performance Garage. Again, please consider liking, subscribing, commenting. We got a lot of repairs, upgrades, and restorations coming up. Again, stay tuned. Thanks. Bye.